Hi, everybody. My name is Collin Kettell. I'm the CEO and founder of Nevada King Gold Corp. Today, I want to provide a Q3 2024 walkthrough of the corporate presentation. Nevada King is currently focused on advancing its Atlanta gold mine project. Atlanta is located in southeast portion of Nevada, and a couple other items on Nevada King were led by a very well-capitalized and experienced management team. And we've got one goal in mind right now, which is showing multi-million ounce potential for the Atlanta gold system. A few high-level points on Atlanta. Atlanta is a past-producing gold mine. As I said before, it's located in the southeast portion of the state in Lincoln County. We have a very large property package. It covers roughly 120 square kilometers. There is a 43101 resource on the Atlanta project. However, I will caveat that the resource does not include any of the drilling that's been done by Nevada King since 2021, which equates to about 90,000 meters of drilling. We have spent about $50 million advancing the asset. And Atlanta is an intrusive dominated system that seems to have porphyry type characteristics to it. All that being said, we think that there's significant potential to find a lot more gold mineralization at the project. On this slide, what we're doing is showing just a few of our highlight intervals. And the idea here is to show the caliber of results that we've been generating since 2022 when we launched our phase 2 drill program. There are 4 intervals that are highlighted on this page. 108 meters of 11.6 grams per ton gold is the most significant intercept we've had. Also 82 meters of 6.5 grams, and very recently 55 meters of 6.3 grams and 43 meters of 4.7 grams. I will note that those 4 intervals that I just read off are located at 4 distinct zones across the project, so these are not all concentrated in the same place. Let's talk a little bit about the management and board. My co-founder for the company is Paul Matisik. Paul is a serially successful entrepreneur in the resource space. He's sold his last 6 companies for a cumulative $3.5 billion. And he really excels at taking advanced assets and finding suitors for them, which we think is going to come in handy as we continue to advance the asset. Our CFO, Bassam Mubarak, has been Paul's partner in most of those last 6 deals. And on the board of directors, we have Craig Roberts, who's a mining engineer by background, as well as Bill Hayden, who is an exploration geologist by background. This slide just shows a bit of that track record that I just went over. It's also worth noting that the other company that I founded and run is Newfound Gold Corp. And in fact, an interesting piece of history is that Nevada King and Newfound were the same company until 2018 when the two of them split apart. A few words on the technical team. This slide has quite a few people on it, so I'm not going to go through and provide biographies on everybody, but I would urge you to go to our website and take a closer look at this. Our exploration team is led by Cal Heron as exploration manager. Cal's been responsible for much of the discovery that's been playing out over the last 3 years, and he's spent much of the last 40 years in the Great Basin looking for gold. He's joined by Hayden Smith, our Atlanta project manager, and Hayden's been with us for the past 4 years since we began our exploration program. It's important to touch on why Nevada, why now. Nevada is consistently ranked as the top mining jurisdiction in the world. This year it was ranked number 2. And over the past decade, it's almost always in the number 1 position. The reason for this is Nevada is a great home for gold mining, and most companies are interested in having a foothold here. In 2020, something really changed in terms of a shift towards M&A starting back in the state. And we've now seen several companies enter or re-enter the state. If you can have a discovery of magnitude in Nevada, there's really no other jurisdiction that will provide a higher premium than a Nevada discovery. Let's talk specifically on the Atlanta gold mine now. So a bit of history. Atlanta was initially discovered in the late 19th century and was the site of small-scale, high-grade mining for much of the next 50 years. In 1975, it went into a more modern sense of production with an open pit, and that ceased in 1985 with about 100,000 ounces of gold produced. Then it went into the hands of a few explorers, Goldfields, Kinross, and a smaller outfit named Meadow Bay, and in 2018, Nevada King purchased the asset for just over $1 million. On this slide, we're looking at a map of the southeast portion of Nevada. You can see the Utah border there on the right side, and you can see right near the border is the Atlanta Gold Mine project located in Lincoln County. Lincoln County is a very sparsely populated county. It's the fourth least populated county in Nevada. And the Atlanta project is very well supported by locals. This is the same county that has the town of Pioche, and Pioche is, of course, a historical mining jurisdiction. We have great access that runs right up to the project. Highway 93, you can see there, runs from Las Vegas up past Pioche, and you turn off of Highway 93 onto a county-maintained road, and that maintained road, you can go 50, 60 miles an hour. It brings you right up to the mine site. Let's talk the geological setting in which we find Atlanta. This is actually found within what's called a super-volcano complex, and this is a bit of newer science out of Brigham Young University, where they've found that a volcanic eruption, or a set of volcanic eruptions that occurred about 30 million years ago out of an area called Wawa Springs, located in western Utah, put a giant volcano in this area that's actually made up of something like 15 super eruptions and 20 calderas. And it's in this setting where we find the Atlanta Gold Mine project. So this is a map of the district, the Atlanta district. You can see the Atlanta caldera outlined there in the white dotted area. We control the full district. And this caldera is one of those volcanoes that was put there from this supervolcanic eruption. On the very eastern side of this caldera is where you see the Atlanta Resource Zone. The Atlanta Resource Zone is where much of the drilling has been conducted by historic operators as well as by Nevada King over the past 3 years. We're now looking at an aerial shot of the Atlanta Gold Mine project. In the foreground, you can see the existing Atlanta Gold Mine pit. You can also see the roads coming in from Pioche and out to Ely that I had mentioned earlier. We also have crew quarters on site, as well as a deeded power line and our own water, all located on site. The pit itself is located on patented private ground. That's important because it means we have unfettered access to disturb the ground. And then around that, the rest of our project is made up of Bureau of Land Management ground, and that's all covered by a plan of operation, which means we have the highest level of certification for an exploration project. And if we want to go ahead and drill new areas, we just have to liaise with the BLM and ask for permission. When we picked up the project, it did have, and it continues to have, a 43101 resource. That resource has 460,000 ounces in the measured and indicated category, and another 140,000 ounces in the inferred. As I'll show you in a couple minutes, this resource is based off of just 75 holes, and most of those holes were put in from the west, angled back to the east. We're looking at a discovery timeline now, and I'm going to breeze through this for the purpose of this presentation, but this slide does act as a very good guide to bring you through the different phases of exploration that Nevada King has gone through to date. And so let's start at phase 1. In 2021, we did a modest phase 1 drill program at Atlanta. It was 63 holes, and it was designed to go ahead and test some areas that had largely been overlooked by past explorers. If you look at this map on the right side, we can see the outline of the historic Atlanta pit in red, and you can see the outline of the existing resource in this gray area. And what you'll note is most of the historical holes, which are these black circles that went into generating the resource, were off to the west side of the resource or west of the resource itself. And the reason for this is that's a generally flat area where it was very accessible and easy to put in angle holes and then drill back towards under the pit. What we did is we actually recontoured the pit and we brought a drill rig down into the bottom of the pit for the first time. And this was our discovery. We hit 5 holes, anywhere between 2.5 and 5.5 grams per ton gold over a thick bed of about 50 meters. And then we also drilled about 600 meters north of the pit, and we also hit high grade along one of the main perceived structures. We hit 20 meters of 4 grams per ton. So we stepped back from that and we thought it probably was worth investigating things quite a bit deeper at Atlanta. And one of the first things that Cal came up with is a new interpretation for the geological model at Atlanta. Past operators had been adhering to a single vein structure. And so they perceived that there was a single, roughly 45-degree dipping angle structure off to the west. And this single vein would have controlled all of the mineralization that was being drilled and found at Atlanta. Cal immediately recognized that this was not the case. And in fact, it was more of a flat-lying ore body that had been chopped up by multiple faults. And so instead of having one vein or fluid conduit, Cal recognized that there were multiple fluid conduits throughout the Atlanta resource and beyond. And this is very important because more fluid conduits mean more opportunity for gold deposition and more opportunity for high-grade gold deposition. So with that understanding, we launched our Phase 2 drill program, which began in 2022. We're still in the Phase 2 program, and we've done about 75,000 meters of drilling so far. And what we've done is we've managed to identify a network of faults that run north-south primarily, as well as east-west. We've also found several instances of very high-grade gold, and we've pushed the margins of mineralization well outside of the resource zone as it was previously known. This slide provides some highlight intervals that we've intercepted in our Phase 2 program. You can also see on the right side a map. And once again on the map, you can see the Atlanta pit, you can see the resource zone, and you can see our holes, which are located as far as 600 meters north, 100 meters west, and 50 to 100 meters south of the resource zone. We're now looking at an actual cross-section as opposed to the conceptual cross-section that we looked at before on the old versus new model slide. And this shows how we've identified mineralization at Atlanta. Starting at surface and heading steeply down is the Atlanta Mine Fault Zone. The Atlanta Mine Fault Zone is what would have been historically mined at the Atlanta pit. And the Atlanta Mine Fault Zone runs about 100 to 150 meters wide. It's highly chopped up with a lot of faults. There are some really high-grade blocks in there. And then when we cross what's called the West Atlanta Fault, which we believe to be the main fault structure responsible for mineralizing deposition at Atlanta, we then get into what's called the West Atlanta Graben Zone. And the West Atlanta Graben Zone was mainly ignored by past operators because, as I had mentioned before, they were drilling angle holes from west to east and really focused on that Atlanta Mine Fault Zone. You can see from the cross-section here, the West Atlanta Graben Zone has some very thick beds of mineralization, and in fact, those beds of mineralization are exceeding 150 meters in certain spots. Along the way, we did have discovery of a Bonanza grade intercept. This occurred in October of 2023. We hit 11.6 grams over 108 meters, and this included a very high grade segment of 37 grams per ton over 29 meters. And from the beginning of the program, Cal, as our exploration manager, has been telling me that the type of Bonanza grade intercept that we did get was supported by the model. And in fact, he expected to potentially hit something like this. And so what we're showing on the right side here is a conceptual cross-section of what this looks like. And so you're seeing a primary fault, in this case being the West Atlanta Fault number 1, where the gold mineralization comes up. It then hits our horizontal unconformity and it starts to bleed out laterally, and so you get very high grade gold concentrated closer to the fault, and the grade drops off as you get further from the fault. We don't have just one instance though of high grade gold, we have multiple instances, and on this slide, which we call our multiple jewelry box model at Atlanta, you can see just how many different instances there are of very high grade gold. The diamond shaped holes are holes drilled by Nevada King, the circles are holes that are drilled by historical operators. And the important thing to point out here is we're looking at an area that's over 500 meters north-south by 300 meters east-west, where we're seeing a wide distribution of this kind of grade. And that's a hallmark of the strength of this system. So summing up from Phase 2, we defined 3 of the primary zones, which were the Atlanta Mine Fault Zone, the West Atlanta Graben Zone, and the North Extension Zone, which is immediately north of those areas. We did validate the geological model. We figured out the locations of a lot of these faults, learned how the system works and how mineralization was deposited. And most importantly, it's provided us clues as to the origins of the gold and hence, where do we find more of it? It's been paving the way for district scale discoveries that we're making right now. And so you can see 3 of those discoveries shown at the bottom of the slide here: the East Ridge target, the South Quartzite Ridge target, and the Wild West Zone. Starting with the East Ridge target, this was our first regional discovery that we made. You can see on the map on the left side, the East Ridge target. It's roughly 1,000 meters north-south and about 50 to 100 meters wide. And it's located directly east of the pit. If you were standing at the pit looking at the East Ridge, you'd be looking up at a topographic high. And this area did not have road access. But historic operators did know that there was gold mineralization at the surface. Based on the old model, it was perceived that it probably was not rooted. That is, it was probably a superficial expression of gold that was limited just to the surface. And so it was largely overlooked. And we had the same view of it until we did some powerful geophysical work, including our CSAMT work that we've done. And so we're now looking at two of the CSAMT lines, CSAMT line 10 and 9. And you can see on both lines the main West Atlanta fault coming up over here. This is where the pit that was historically mined occurs in the Atlanta Mine Fault Zone. And then you can see this dark blue area that is immediately east of it, leading up the East Ridge. And this blue area we know to be dolomite. Dolomite is a very impenetrable rock. It's not generally a good host for gold. But if you continue going up the ridge, you can see some type of an intrusive body that's poking up, that's deeply rooted. And this happens to coincide exactly with the gold that we were finding at surface. So with the CSAMT in hand, we knew that we had to go up here and drill. And that's exactly what we did. And we found 1.3 grams per ton over 23 meters in intrusive rock. Now, based on the size of the East Ridge target, we don't see it as being a tremendous opportunity for ounce building, but rather what we see this as is a testing ground for the CSAMT work because we have much larger targets that are located throughout the district. And one such target can actually be seen by looking further east on the same CSAMT. So we're now looking at CSAMT line 12. Once again, you can see the pit, you can see the East Ridge target and the intrusive plume coming up into it. And you can also see the same intrusive plume running up east of the East Ridge into what we call the jumbo target. The jumbo target is a far larger target. It's about 3,000 meters north-south by 500 meters east-west. Not a single historical drill hole has gone into the jumbo target. And that's because from the surface, this is completely obscured by colluvium or alluvium, essentially a 40 to 50 meter blanket that's covering this area. And so nobody had any reason before the CSAMT to look at this area. We now know that this is a very high priority area for drilling, and it's something that we're going to be looking at drilling here in the next couple of months. Another very large target area that we've known about and that the CSAMT has given us a lot more confidence on is the South Quartzite Ridge target. We just recently put a hole out in July of 2024 of 6.3 grams per ton over 55 meters. So where this hole is located is at the very southern portion of our patented claims, directly abutting the South Quartzite Ridge. And again, if you were standing at the Atlanta pit, looking south, you would see a very large ridge that starts right at the end of the resource zone, and that ridge runs 2.5 kilometers north-south. The ridge coincides with our main faults, including the West Atlanta Fault. The West Atlanta Fault appears to run all throughout under the ridge. The ridge is, as the name suggests, covered by Eureka quartzite. And quartzite, again, like dolomite, is a very impenetrable rock. It's not a good host for gold mineralization. But what this hole showed is as we drilled through the quartzite and as soon as we broke through the quartzite, we hit intrusive rock, and we hit high-grade intrusive rock over 55 meters. And so it tells us that the Eureka quartzite actually acts as a cap to prevent the pooling fluids from going any higher and caps those fluids in place right below the quartzite. A couple other points to show on the South Quartzite Ridge is that this whole 2.5 kilometer area acts as an anticlinal fold. And an anticlinal fold, the best way to think about it is like the roof of a house. And if there was a fire in the house, smoke would be moving up and it would get trapped under the roof. So the same way with the anticline concept is that the Eureka quartzite is actually acting potentially as a trap for intrusive mineralizing fluids that are occurring below. As we look on the CSAMT below the South Quartzite Ridge, you can see that this Eureka quartzite in dark blue is capping on top of what appears to be intrusive mineralization. The South Quartzite Ridge, 2.5 kilometers long, has seen almost no drilling, and it has seen no drilling along the entire anticline. And so this is a very high priority target for us. In fact, if there's an elephant to be had out at Atlanta, being that it's directly on trend and the size of it and the fact that it hasn't been drilled historically, we have high hopes for what we're going to find as we continue drilling the South Quartzite Ridge. And then the Wild West Zone, which is our most recent discovery we put out in August of 2024. So the Wild West Zone directly adjoins the Atlanta Resource Zone to the west. Historical operators had largely ignored this area because they perceived that the West Atlanta Fault number 2, which bounds the West Atlanta Graben Zone, which is the edge of the Atlanta Resource Zone, was the end of mineralization. And they had good reason to think that because a couple drill holes that they put on the west side of it did not come up with much grade. They also knew that mineralization was continuing to deepen, and as they were looking at this purely as an open pit concept, that didn't interest them. But when we got our CSAMT work back, we saw a large anomaly, and you can see that on this map, that seems to underlie this area that we now call the Wild West Zone. And so we went ahead and we plugged a few holes in here, and what we found is that there is high-grade gold at depth, and in some cases, very high-grade gold at depth. Our highlight interval, in fact, is running 45 meters of 4.5 grams. So this is a very tangible potential ounce building exercise that is going on right now. It's wide open to the west and to the south. And as you can see in the cross section and the plan map, this really opens up a large area for us to continue adding high-grade gold mineralization directly to the Atlanta Resource Zone. All in all, the geophysical tools that we've been relying on are proving to be very powerful tools for us at Atlanta and are actually leading to discoveries as we speak. As we look broader across the entire district, there are several other targets that we haven't had the opportunity yet to put out to the market, but we're working on now. And these collectively, along with the ones that we've already started exploring, are going to form the basis for our Phase 3 drill program, which we're going to be launching very shortly. And so our ambitions as we're moving from 2024 into 2025 is to take the knowledge that we've garnered from the Atlanta Resource Zone and directly around it and apply it to the broader district in hopes of finding a much more significant gold system and unlocking that multi-million ounce potential that we believe Atlanta has. The Atlanta system is very unique in that the entire project is heavily oxidized from what we can see so far. And it doesn't really matter how deep we drill, we seem to find that everything is heavily oxidized. Typically, when you drill deeper, you'll find something of a transition zone or sulfide mineralization, and that can add extra complexity around how to potentially recover gold mineralization if a project advances to mining. A gentleman by the name of Gary Simmons has been leading up our metallurgical test work program. Gary was the head of Newmont's processing and engineering for 20 years, so he has a tremendous amount of experience, especially in the Great Basin. And he's continuing to work on our metallurgy. We've got recoveries for high grade on milling exceeding 90%, and we have the opportunity for heap leach and run-of-mine heap leach in the case of an open pit scenario. So let's review the hallmarks of a large gold system, which we see at Atlanta. We definitely have some strong intrusive related activity that seems to be feeding the gold mineralization at Atlanta. We have the presence of Bonanza grade gold, not just in one hole, but across a significant area. We're finding that just about all of the material that we're drilling is oxidized or heavily oxidized, and we're finding gold mineralization in thick beds. So you mix those things together, and it tells you that something very strong has fed the gold at Atlanta. This next slide we put together to try to demonstrate what is the value of an oxide gold discovery in Nevada. And the outlier is clearly Frontier Gold with their Long Canyon deposit. It was taken over in 2011, near the peak of the market, for $2.3 billion US dollars. There are then 5 other projects that we've identified that have been taken over for anywhere between 180 million US and 370 million US dollars. Long Canyon certainly stands out because of the grade. They had over 2 grams per ton. And you can see that the rest of the projects were sitting around a much more normal global average of anywhere from 0.5 gram up to 0.75 gram per ton. We don't know exactly what Atlanta is going to look like at this point because we're in the midst of the discovery, but we certainly see a lot of upside potential from where we are now. In that same vein, let's talk about the share structure. Nevada King has a very unique share structure in that we have a lot of support from management and insiders. You can see here that I own approximately 18% of the company. And I would like to note that I've paid approximately what the 18% is worth for that position, so no free shares being given out here. We also have a 18% component of additional management and insider participation. And because of that, we've managed to finance the last 3 years from that group as lead orders without the use of a warrant. And each time that financing was done at market or at a premium to market. I bring this up, it's a very important point because financings are often done at terms that are advantageous to people that are coming in at the expense of investors that are only buying in the market. And that's something we're very proud of, that we've been able to actually create a positive outcome around our financings as opposed to dragging the share price down each and every time. On this last slide, you'll find my contact details. If you have any questions following this presentation, please feel free to reach out. We're quite responsive here at Nevada King. And I want to thank you for joining and watching this presentation.